Good afternoon. Good to see you all here today for part 2 of Growing Up Tech Smart. You see that picture up there, I noticed something that looks to me very strange, and that is to the far left of the picture, that little guy. He's what, 16 months old? And we're talking about tech, we're talking about smartphones. That doesn't jive with me, it doesn't gel with my mind. But I was telling Chuck yesterday, I said, I've seen these plastic toys made by Play School, and they're in the form of a tablet, and so little guys that age are taught to start looking at a tablet and playing with it. And Chuck told me he'd seen something else, and that was a stroller where the kid could sit in the stroller and look up and play with a tablet. They are programmed from that age or even younger to, when they become an adolescent or a young adult, to have problems with tech. So that is true. It's not a misnomer up there. Most of you weren't here last night, so just a real brief, I'll share my experience with Project Patch. Started way back in the, I think, 1990s. I was working for a logger up in Baker, Oregon, and it was a father and a son. The son was married to a lady named Dawn, and her father was named Dan.
Dan Rodhoff.
Rahoff, who lived in Garden Valley, Idaho. And it turns out that they had a ranch, and they had contacted the Idaho Conference, said, hey, we'd like to donate this to some worthy cause. The Idaho Conference called Tom Sanford and said, hey, would you like a ranch? And apparently they'd been praying for something more permanent, and they went and looked at it. And long story short, that's where they're at 30 years later or something. And when I was there in May doing volunteer work with Maranatha Volunteers, I saw the original building. What do they call it now?
The bathhouse.
The bathhouse. And it looks like a single-wide travel trailer, but it's a stick-built house. And what I was told was one end was the boys' room, one end was the girls' room, and the middle was like the dining room, kitchen. It's not very big. And now it's used for tool storage and things like that. The campus now is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And the program that they have is first class. Chuck was just telling me today that they have other programs that come to them and go through their program and look at it and gain insights from them, just like Chuck did here just a few weeks ago. He went to Texas and was looking at another program that had been around since the 1890s or something. A long time, a United Methodist program in Texas down by Waco. And so anyway, they do a lot of good work there. I met Chuck on my mission trip in May, and I had already fallen in love with Project Patch and what they do for troubled teenagers. They work with kids from ages 12 up until they turn 18. And it's a full-time residential live-in facility where they have a certified school for them. They don't slip back in their schoolwork. And besides, they have individual and group counseling and all the things that they need. He said the girls are out on a weekend trip this weekend to the dunes in
Bruno.
Yeah. Somewhere. So, and they've showed us pictures. They go rafting on the river. They do all these different things. And also another thing he told me today is, and we picked it up a little bit in the sermon this morning, is that what these kids need is relationships. They need a relational program, and that's what they focus on, is relational things. A lot of these kids have been through a lot of trauma, and they need to know that somebody's there for them, loves them, and cares about them, and that there's some stability in their life. So anyway, last night we shared part 1 of Growing Up Tech Smart. It was kind of an overall general view of the picture, and today we're going to get into some more nuts and bolts. So let's have a quick prayer before we start. Father God, we just thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for bringing Chuck Hagele into our lives this weekend. We pray that you be with him and as he shares this information, Lord, and help us to hear what we need to hear. Help us to make adjustments in our own lives, but also in the way we parent or grandparent, or as the way we are as church parents to the kids in our church. So thank you for this opportunity. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right. So, you guys ready? Energy? How's the energy? in college, I was taking theology at Union College, and I had a history of Bible times class that was taught right after lunch. That was, and I wasn't a sleep in class kind of person. I was responsible for a lot of my own bills, and so I wanted to stay awake, but it was so hard. And then some of the time, Project Patch, we're really blessed as an organization that we work with a lot of grandparents that are raising their grandchildren. Typically within our care, there's at least 3 to 4 kids that are in grandparent care, and the grandparents it's a task. I'll just say that. And so with the camp meetings and stuff, a lot of times when I speak at camp meetings, I'll be doing tech seminars, and I'll also be doing a grandparenting seminar, just kind of encouraging the grandparents around those issues. I don't know what's wrong with camp meetings. They give me the grandparent seminar right after lunch, and it is brutal. And so if you do need to take a nap, I understand. I get it. But at the same time, my goal is not to scare you this afternoon, but part of what we have to do is kind of wake up to what's happening around some of these technologies. We need to get comfortable talking about things like pornography, video games, addiction, and some of the challenges around social media. Not from a ways to raise shame or embarrassment or fear, but we need to talk about it so we can bring tools, so we can shine light about it. Instead of a child dealing with this stuff in isolation and fear, how can we talk about it in ways that are productive? The verse that I use as kind of my life verse, and we kind of shape it with our kids, John 10:10, the thief comes to what? Steal, kill, and destroy. That's the truth. When you look at what Satan's purposes around us, steal our attention, steal our ambition, steal our impact, kill and destroy. So many of the times when we look at what a kid's going through, we don't necessarily look at this verse and totally understand what's going on. Yesterday we talked a little bit about how it's easy for us to get into a doom and gloom picture of the future. I told you, I kind of hinted about it. I ask kids on a regular basis, how many of you believe that some point in your life you're going to fall head over heels in love with someone, you're going to pursue and win their heart, you're going to put your marriage into covenant, which is marriage before God, before your church family, and you're going to be together through tough times, good times, till death do you part. How many of you believe that's in your future? And I ask kids, and I love it because sometimes kids will be like, yes, that's me. But what sort of response do you think I get from most kids? I don't know. I'm not sure. There's some kids that, who am I to think that I could do that, because all these people I really trust and admire, they haven't been able to pull off this marriage thing, right? And so they're a little bit despondent about it. We've got kids that tell me at Project Patch, I don't believe that there's anyone out there, if they truly know me, that they could love me. That's a 14-year-old that doesn't believe that there's anyone that will care for them in the future with the scars that they have. And then there's the mathematics kids. What do you think the math kids tell me about marriage? It's a what? 50-50 coin toss. How many of you heard that? Is it true? It's interesting because how you slice it and dice it's really important, and how you look at the stats are really important. If you look at the likelihood of a first-time covenanted marriage, what's the likelihood of that marriage lasting? Is it 50-50? It's way higher. Probably close to about 70% of a covenanted first marriage is going to last. The problem is that if you divorce and you remarry, the chance of that marriage ending in divorce is quite a bit higher. And so every year you've got people that are in their second, third, fourth marriages, and those marriages are ending, but the first marriages are stronger. Does that make sense? And so of the 30% of people that divorce, it's more likely that they divorce multiple times. Kind of complicated. It sounds complicated, right? But the reason I lay down the stats is that it's much better if you have a covenanted marriage, that it's way better than a coin toss. Way better than a coin toss. But here's the thing, is if you've got a 14, 15-year-old that believes that a covenanted, fulfilling marriage, including a marriage sexuality, is not in their future, how's that going to impact their dating? How's that going to impact their internet searches? Right? So Satan, even before a child's at dating age, has somehow robbed even the concept of covenant love. Does that make sense? And so when we say the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, we're seeing it on a daily basis. Kids that don't believe that certain things are possible. Even though marriage is hard work, marriage is a beautiful thing that we really should uphold as a possibility for our kids. It really is something reachable for them. Vibrant marriage relationships are possible, and God loves them. God loves them. That doesn't mean that if we make a mistake that God's not in our side anymore, but for our kids, we need to keep instilling that hope. And what did Jesus say in response to this? The thief comes for steal, kill, and destroy. Why did Jesus come? Life. Life, and abundant life. Not just breathing, not just heartbeat life, but living, truly alive. And so as we look at why are we having this conversation with kids, why do I bother spending time with kids talking about things like technology, is because I'd love for them to have vibrant life, abundant life. That's my goal. The reason that I talk to kids in schools is that I want more for them. I'm not trying to take away life and fun and joy. I'm trying to help them discover a life and joy that's way beyond any kind of device, any kind of electronic relationship. And so the couching of what we're doing is that we're not trying to take away or ruin, we're trying to give you expansive life. Who ruins lives? Satan ruins lives. And our goal is to bring that abundance. This is going to be hard for you to see. I had to get readers. This is taken from the porn phenomenon, Barna Research, as well as Covenant Eyes. They got together and did research. Research around children and porn use is really difficult because it's kind of invasive. You don't really get great results. But they tried to look. If you look at the numbers, the first three numbers is daily use, weekly, once or twice a month. And the top question is for kids 13 to 17, how often within a month, what percentage of kids come across pornography online? And so if you look at that, that's about 49. About half of the kids at 13 to 17 will come across something pornographic online, at least monthly. When you look at that seek out line, that's quite a bit lower. And I think that's important to say, just because your kid has come across pornography doesn't mean they're looking for it. The problem is for people that are looking for pornography, they tend to get more coming at all sorts of crazy times. I find it interesting when people talk about how horrible TikTok is and how all the videos are really inappropriate. TikTok is an algorithm that knows what you want. And so in a way, if you've got a TikTok full of smut, it must mean that you're looking for it in other places. Does that make sense? If you've got a TikTok full of bird videos, that's probably what you're interested in. Not to say that they don't test you with weird things, but for the kids that are looking for porn, it's more likely that it'll keep coming across them at really unfortunate times. So you look at the young adult numbers, that those numbers go dramatically higher for both porn, seeking it out, as well as porn use. When you look down, this is another chart from the same research. It's kind of hard to tell that complete left side, that 72% is males, non-practicing Christians, ages 13 to 24, and this would be regular users of pornography. So that's looking at 72%, 13 to 24-year-olds. When you look at Christians, the same age group, men 13 to 24, that's 41%. Would be defined as regular user, 41%. So that number drops, which is kind of exciting to see, but if you had 10 young men in your youth group, what does that tell you? Is that there's a good chance that at least 4 of them struggle with pornography. So that's a pretty big number, isn't it? And a lot of times we look at this and we say, okay, let's get all the boys together and talk about pornography. But when you look at the statistics, for females, non-practicing Christians, ages 13 to 24, so young women, about 36% would be regular to occasional users of regular users of pornography. When you go to Christian girls, it drops down to 13%. But that's still, one girl for every 10 in the youth group. And people look at that and they say that can't be true, because a lot of times when they look at pornography, they say boys look at porn because they are what? Visual. Which is the craziest thing to say, that girls aren't visual. Every single social media platform, Instagram, Snapchat, all these are highly visual platforms that are dominated by who? Girls, right? When you look at some of the stuff having to do with drawing, art, even the stuff around like the Asian art, who's a big consumer of that? Girls. And so what we find is that girls and boys use porn differently. At Project Patch, I teach tech groups with both boys and girls, and the reason they end up at pornography is different, but the pull and the effect is dramatically, both boys and girls struggle, I'll just say that. The other thing is that for boys to struggle with pornography, most people are like, yeah, that makes sense. For girls to struggle, there's a stigma that's placed on top of that that causes huge amounts of shame and keeps a lot of girls trapped, silent and trapped. And so when we approach it, it's like, it makes sense that a lot of kids would use porn. There's another slide that Barna did, and that slide was looking at what's always wrong, what do kids consider always wrong. And so if you cheat on your boyfriend, girlfriend, high percentage of kids said that's wrong. So cheating's wrong, lying, stealing, they were saying that usually, that drops down to like 80-some% are wrong. It was interesting because about at 50-some% was not recycling. So not recycling. Majority of teens said that not recycling is usually or always wrong. Then you drop down to like low 30, 20% range would be viewing pornographic images, watching, reading a pornographic novel, those sorts of things were in the 20% range. And so you could look at that, and what that really statistically means is that more kids would be angry about not recycling than they would be about pornography. And so most of us what's wrong with these kids? Well, if I talk to teenagers, if you say, how many of you know a song about recycling? Majority of them in school or some environment sang some happy little song about recycling and taking care of stuff, right? Which trash can to use. If you go to an airport or a busy place that has the recycling and the landfill, you can watch people make that decision on a regular basis, right? It's something that's easy to talk about. And so as you talk about it, kids learn. Does that make sense? So without even talking about it, when you talk to the majority of kids, how many of you have had a conversation with your family, parents, mentor about pornography? What sort of numbers do you think most kids have? Zero. So with zero conversations, about 30% of kids are convicted that they really don't want this in their life. So imagine what happens with that number as we talk about it, as we bring it into the open. So I'm not mad at the kids. I'm just saying that let's talk about it. Let's get it out into the open. We're going to talk about video games, and it's kind of interesting as we talk through video games is that about 9% of kids that are regular users, they say are clinically or pathologically addicted. What does that mean? It means that even if they want to quit, they can't. Okay, when they try to quit, what are they going to experience? Obsessive thoughts and withdrawals, right? What does withdrawals from video game look like? Sleep issues, irritability, appetite problems, obsessive thoughts. Sounds like a teenager, doesn't it? For Project Patch, kids don't choose to come to us. Parents place them with us. And a lot of our kids, not a lot, but quite a few of our kids have nicotine addiction when they come to us, have been smoking, vaping, doing something with nicotine. For us, there's a natural compassion. They don't get to smoke with us. They don't get any of that treatment, but I can understand a teen that's in smoking. My heart kind of goes out to them. Can you kind of relate to that? They can't smoke. They've got a dependence. They've got urgings, cravings, all that stuff. Even though I'm not helping meet that need, I can understand that it's real. For kids that come to us, they've been playing video games sometimes, 14, 15 hours a day. That's their life. That's their identity. And when they come to us, they don't get those devices. They didn't get to say goodbye to their online friends, and it's cut off. I will say it's harder to be compassionate toward those kids and their withdrawals. Would you agree with me? We're just like, get over it, turn it off. Quit that stupid game, not realizing that pathological clinical addiction means that something's happened within the body. It's a process addiction, so there's no substance coming into them, but that process addiction still feeds these crazy things about it. Statistics, about 23 kids that play on a regular basis, really, when you start defining addiction, and I don't remember exactly how they define it for this study. For Project Patch, we have that idea that it's harming you in some way. So it's causing harm to yourself. And it's causing harm to your relationships. So it's relationship interfering, self-damaging, and sometimes future interfering, so it's causing some future problems. And even if you want to quit, you can't. Okay, so that's kind of the way that we talk about, especially process addictions. It's getting in the way of life. Does that make sense? It's life hurting, and you can't stop. So about 23% of the kids that are playing say, yeah, that sounds like me. What I find interesting is about 44% say their friends are. Have you noticed that sometimes friends are a little more accurate in their assessments than you are? So they look at their friends and they say, yeah, a huge amount of my friends would choose a video game over a relationship. This impacting their school performance, their life, their things that they have to do, and it's getting in the way of those things. I will say, and we'll study this a little bit more, as we talk about video games, and especially addiction, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time talking about the very worst games online. There's plenty of people talking about this game's really bad because they have this and that, and there's some really filthy, horrible games out there, I'll just say that. But video game addiction does not require immoral games. Okay, do you know what the most addictive video game in history is? Most people stuck playing it, thinking about it. Not Pac-Man. Tetris. Tetris was a game with falling shapes. You're turning stuff, you're dropping stuff in. That was the game. Tetris captured people like amazing amounts, lots of lost sleep. Is Tetris immoral? No, it's not even that sophisticated of a game, but it captured people in a crazy way. Nowadays, when I talk to kids, and especially when kids are coming into our care, their parents are saying, my kid's got a problem with video games, and then you talk to the kid and you discover, what do their parents have? Their parents are on their phone playing quick little games for hours on end. And so part of what I want to look at is get away from this like, oh, that's smut, this is smut. Just simply look at what is getting in the way of life and relationships, what's getting in the way that we can't stop doing. And so the Plugged In is a pretty good resource for parents that want to look at, is this game appropriate for my child or not appropriate? And that's a good question to ask, but just because it's appropriate doesn't mean it stays healthy. Are we kind of clear on that? And that's important to look at, even for us as adults. And we'll talk about video games a little bit more. This was a really interesting study, and I apologize for the size of it. If you contact me, I can send you my slides so you can see stuff closer. This is rates of depression and anxiety, and there's a longitudinal study done with kids going way, way back. And so this is looking, I think it's the 90s through 2015, so you're looking at that band. What do you notice as you look at these numbers of depression and anxiety? You see a spike, right? Trying to lay over what happened, that was about 2010, 11, when those numbers just started to spike. And they've continued to escalate as we've done these studies. What they can see, not necessarily a causation correlation, it's hard to exactly get at what it is, other than that was when smartphone usage by kids surpassed 50%. Is that as they became just a matter-of-fact life for more and more kids, that the anxiety, depression just went up. This next slide is kind of interesting. This is also taken from iGen, the book, that's really looking at statistics over time. What this is looking at is suicidal risk by the number of hours of tech use, okay? And so if you look at clear on the left, that's none. As you look at this, what do you see happen after less than an hour up to 1 hour? Let's see if this works. This would be awesome if it worked. It's not working. Oh, there it is. Oh, that's amazing, isn't it? So what do you see in this area? What happens to that risk factor? Goes down slightly, doesn't it? So for teens, I'll just let you in a little bit, is that teens have this fear of missing out, that if they don't know what's happening, what do they fill their brain with? The most horrible guesses possible, right? I don't know where my friends are, but they're probably all together making fun of me. That's kind of where the teen brain goes. So if they don't know what their kids or their friends are doing, what activities are happening, they tend to sometimes get higher anxiety because of that, okay? Fear of not knowing what's going on. And so if you've got a teen that's highly anxious and you take their phone away as a punishment and you see their anxiety increase, why is that? Because now they're using their imagination to imagine the worst, okay? And so what this study is showing is that with slight tech use for about an hour or less a day, that the kids might actually feel a little less anxious. But then what do you see happen quickly? Escalates. It escalates to the point that their suicidal risk actually increases the more hours that they use. Continues to increase. And average teens, how many hours are they using tech per day? Yeah, 12. The numbers are really hard to reach because kids will say that, well, they're not actually using it, they're just listening to music, some of those kind of things. But you're looking at hours, at least a work day, a day. So 8 to 12 hours is not unusual for kids to be on tech. What are they doing on that time? Kind of varies. But the hours are way beyond that 1 hour a day. That 1 hour a day of especially social. It just goes way beyond that. And so when we look at this, there's interesting stuff that we're getting other than just recognizing that our kids are getting dysregulated. They're getting suicidal risk, anxiety's going up, depression's going up. All the numbers start getting really negative. And that's a worry. You look at some of the stuff, we'll talk about social, but girls, especially young girls, are affected hugely by some of these things. And so yesterday, as we really started the premise of what is the skill we want our kids to have, they need to be able to turn it off when it's not a benefit for them. They need to be able to manage that off switch. Recognize that this isn't something I want to do. And part of the chart that we were even describing yesterday is there comes a point in a kid's life, even if the parent wants to stop them from seeing this stuff, they can't do it. It's up to the child to be able to do that. So we're launching kids to a point that they can own technology. And so part of what we're doing today is really trying to get a language around what is it that is a risk about these things? Why is it that I care? And trying to establish that, trying not to be explicit about it, but just kind of matter of fact, this is what's happening. And so we're going to start with pornography, just to get that past us because it's a challenge. I'll just be transparent here. Is I was exposed to pornography as a prepubescent, like a 6-7 year old little guy, and it did a number on me. I'll just be frank about that. By the grace of God, through recovery, through just lots of help. I've been freed from it, but it's still a constant journey. I just say that, a journey of growth. And I'm just thankful for resources because when I was 12 years old, guess what people talked about? Not pornography, a lot of shame, a lot of embarrassment, but not a whole lot of help. And so as I live my life, as I serve kids, my goal is to really kind of provide a path, a chance that you're not trapped just because you've made some mistakes, that there's skills, there's things you can do, and there's reasons not to use. I think that was one of the things that I never got really clear. I knew it was a problem, but I didn't know why. And so in our discussion today is, you'll get some of that as a background. This is a short snippet. It's not enough to really build a case, but these are some of the reasons that as I share with teens that I just say, you're better off not using, and some of the types of discussions we have. One of the arguments that is really common with teens is you can say, well, this is porn or this is not porn. It's kind of hard to nail down. Do you remember the old law case? It's been years ago that the judge is like, you know it when you see it. That's kind of that idea that they had, but that's kind of eye of the beholder type stuff, right? And then we have a bunch of First Amendment right type stuff. I'm not interested in arguing with a teen or adult. I remember there was a seminar I had with foster parents years ago up in Seattle it wasn't a church group or anything, and I was presenting about some of the risks and challenges around pornography, and I had my first pro-porn parent. That's hard to say, isn't it? So a parent that thought it was like free sexuality and all this stuff was really, really healthy. It was an interesting discussion because I was put on my heels, And part of it is I don't choose to argue with people, but part of the study of it is we want kids that are relational, connected, not self-sufficient. And when you look at some of the reasons I give each day, I think it'll make sense of why this is not a healthy thing. Not just for Christian kids, but for all kids, all adults, there's reasons not to use. But part of the way that I try to talk about pornography is that there's two things, form and function. Form is just the nature of the thing, the object, how you could describe it. Function is how it was designed to be used and how it's used, okay? And so when you look at let me think here, a good example. So this stool, can you see this? You might not be able to see it, but there's a, like office chair with wheels. What's the form of that? Describe it to me. It's got a seat and a back, and usually like 5 spoke wheels. There's some adjustment levers for up and down. So what's the intended function of it? Sit on it, right? What are some additional functions that you use when you're in an office for something like that? Oh, that's good. So you put a heavy box of paper, move it around. How many of you have ever changed light bulbs using that? Yeah, you know there's some of us that have done that. Is it intended for that? Is there problems when you do that? Possibly, right? And so there's a long record of things that are designed for one form and they are used for another function. Does that make sense? Let's talk about swimsuit catalogs. I don't know if they even make those anymore, but imagine a catalog with swimsuits in it for ladies. What's the form of that? What's in there? Probably pictures, right? Probably description of the swimsuit, materials that it's made out of, and they probably throw in some marketing talk about it. Sizing information, price, right? And then ordering information. Does that sound like probably a swimsuit? What is the intended function of that catalog for most girls? Buy a swimsuit, right? Or to make fun of the models. You know, that's the other option is they're not real, you know, that sort of thing. But those are the primary functions, is to be either cynical or to buy a swimsuit, right? So now imagine that a 12-year-old little boy has it in a secret place in his room. Has the form of the magazine changed? No, but has the function changed? And who changed it? The boy did, right? So here's the interesting thing about, especially when we talk about sexuality, when we talk about pornography, is that there's a tendency in this world to take things that are meant for one thing and just start changing it. And the tendency too is for, especially around pornography, is that especially for us guys, is that I wouldn't have a problem if this wasn't allowed, or if girls were more modest, or if, you know, you have the if. But the other truth is that even with all this stuff gone, what does our mind do? It objectifies things. It imagines things. It goes into fantasy type stuff. And so our brains on a regular basis can take something innocent and transform it into something pornographic. And for me, that's almost the harder thing about it. It's not that I blame other people. There are horrible things that are created in this world, but what is it that my brain is doing to participate in that? That's the real battle, isn't it? And so as we look at form and function, we talk about it with kids. Anyone ever been to Florence and seen David's statue, Michelangelo's statue of David? It's amazing. Big rotunda, the statue's amazingly big. David is not wearing a stitch of clothing. Is it pornographic? Could be, right? My response when I saw it was what? Wow. You can see the muscle, you can see the veins. It's like it was a celebration of like, I mean, I was left in awe. It wasn't anything past that. But for people that could see that as a sexual thing also, isn't that interesting? And so part of what I really like to deal with is what's our role? What's our role in this? You know, are we doing things that are problematic? The most searched word traditionally online is under 16. People are looking for pornographic images of girls that are in their teens, under 16. Is that legal? No, it's not a legal form of porn. Here's the thing that the people that are producing it say, well, they're just young girls that look like they're under, age, that they're 16. Okay, so here's the question I have. The form is girls appearing to look younger, and the expectation of the people using their function, their brain is doing what? Imagining that they're under. And so the form and function are highly inappropriate. Highly inappropriate. Even though if their actual age is older, it's still through that imagination changes it. And so part of, as we look at this, is what I'm trying to do is gain that personal responsibility, help us as a society realize what is it that I'm contributing to it. Instead of looking at all the other people's problems, because I'm not going to be able to take away all the smut in this world. There's nations that have tried, and what do they still have problems with? Rape, incest, all sorts of horrible things happening, sometimes at a higher degree than other nations. And so part of what we're looking at is, how do I take responsibility for me? And that's a big step, because it's easier to what? Blame everyone else for our problems. And so that's the step, is this is me. Google, this is such an obvious statement. This is from David Kinnaman. He says, Google can now teach many of our kids about sex. You can ask in the privacy of your browser. How many of you remember when you were kids pre-internet how you learned what the swear words were? Anyone remember that? It's not something that I'm proud of. I was a missionary kid in Japan, and when I came to Canada, where my grandparents lived, all these kids were using words, and we had no idea what they meant. There was a Sabbath lunch in which we were there at the table with all our cousins, and my oldest brother asked the table, what does the F word mean? Is that an awkward Sabbath lunch? Nowadays, how would my brother have found out what that means? Would he have asked at Sabbath lunch? He would have Googled it and found what? Pictures, stories. He would have been brought into something. What we find is a lot of kids are embarrassed to ask, and so they go online and ask. There was a mom that was talking to me once about her boy. I think he was about 10 years old, and he had gone online and he had Googled in, what should a 10-year-old boy's body look like? What was he curious about? Am I okay? Am I normal? Right? That's all the kid wanted to know, was reassurance about himself being normal. What did the internet feed back to him? All sorts of crazy stuff. All sorts of crazy stuff. And his mom caught him looking at that stuff and got him in a bunch of trouble. And his dad ended up shaming him in that incident, and he kept going back to that same search. But was his intention bad? No. I mean, most of us want to know, teens that I work with, most of the teens feel really insecure about themselves, not sure that their bodies are hitting puberty in the right way at the right time and the right whatever. And so they're feeling insecure. And so what do they want to know? Am I fine? Am I normal? Here's the problem, though, with the internet. Will the internet ever tell you you're fine? How many of you have woken up with a panic, with something at night, and you go onto the internet to find out if you're dying? Anyone else? You go to WebMD. Does WebMD ever say, it's fine, go to bed? It doesn't do that, right? It escalates whatever you have. Oh, it must be pancreatic cancer. Your feet. You know what I'm doing. Maybe, am I the only one? Okay, good. I'm feeling a little bad about myself right now. Imagine if I wanted to find out whether I'm normal physically as a guy. Height-wise, stature, abilities, all those kind of things. So I decided I'm going to go to the Portland Trailblazers. I go down to the Moda Center. I go down onto the court to find out whether I'm normal. What would I discover? I'm short. My feet are small. My hands are small. I can't jump. I would physically be a freak, right, compared to what normal is. But the problem is I'm going to the wrong place to ask. Does that make sense? And so girls that are insecure about their breast size go onto the internet. What do they find out? Something wrong with you. Something's wrong with you. Whatever question we ask the internet, especially about am I okay, we're not going to get good results. And so that's the problem, is kids are asking Google, but is the question authentic? Yeah. The question's authentic, but how they're asking it. So the power of creating safety in relationships Telling your kids and demonstrating it over all the little things is, I will always tell you the truth. You can ask me stuff, I will always tell you the truth. Getting at that point that you can ask me awkward questions, and we've gotten lots of awkward questions in our house, even from the kids were really little. I remember one question years ago about Justin Bieber and something that he was doing, and we're like, okay, is it time to talk about Justin Bieber? Because he was doing some inappropriate things, and so we had to talk about it. But how we handle those little moments really create more and more safe moments to talk about stuff. So some of the 3 reasons I'm going to give you, there's actually way more in the video series we created, but these are 3 of the top reasons that I think pornography is especially a problem in sexual formation. 1, it increases appetite and decreases sexual satisfaction. And so as people use pornography, it increases the need for pornography. So imagine if you're thirsty and I give you salt water. What's it going to do? Leave you more depleted, right? More thirsty. And so there's evidence over and over of appetite increasing and satisfaction going down. Less satisfied. GQ magazine, and the reason I use GQ magazine, it's a men's fashion magazine, it's a secular magazine. A lot of kids that I work with just believe it's a prudish Christian thing not to use porn. GQ's not prudish by any means. And their editorial that they had done, their article, the conclusion of it was that men would be better off not using porn. That was their conclusion. And one of the reasons is that they say there's this thing called the Coolidge effect. Coolidge effect means that if you're turned on by it this time, next time that you use it, you're going to be less turned on. And so as you use it, the tastes become increasingly deviant. Does that make sense? So what started off as like a Playboy pornography turns into harder and harder core pornography. Part of the challenge that we're living in right now is that I remember as a teen, my parents caught my secret stash of stuff, and it was embarrassing beyond belief. But my parents could kind of understand why I'd have like a Playboy magazine. Nowadays, when people are finding online stashes for their spouse, they're finding stuff having to do with rape, having to do with bestiality, stuff that's really hard to explain. I'll just say that. And what I say is that it makes sense that some of the stuff they're finding is really inappropriate because that's what pornography, especially online pornography, does. It keeps moving down. That's just how it does. It's a slide down. And so the way that people do that, when the brain is aroused, that front part of the brain is not active, that logical sequential thinking is not active. And so a lot of times when people are aroused, they'll do all sorts of things. How many of you have ever said stuff in anger that you regret? Most of us, right? When you're turned on, some of the same things can happen, is that you look at stuff, you're aroused by stuff that you wouldn't be in your calm brain. But that being said, Satan creates all sorts of shame, and there's a lot of people that like, I can't get help because my problem is really, really bad. I mean, like, Chuck, you can't believe this stuff I've seen, that sort of thing. And what I say is it makes sense that you've seen that. That's how the internet works. Especially internet pornography just pulls you down. The other statistics is about 25% of regular porn users are disinterested in having sex with a partner. They prefer to have sex alone. And when you look at Satan and what he's doing is that he's creating what? I just need to be independent, alone. What does Genesis tell us from the very start of the Bible? Man, it is not good for what? Yeah, it's not good for humankind. Man, women, we're relational. Sorry, I can't drink either. So it's not good for us to be alone. Why is that? Because when we're alone, we end up making more mistakes. We end up suffering. And so when I look at this, to me, it's really sad. So remember the statistics. There's a bunch of kids that don't believe they'll be married ever. And so they're using porn. There's a lot of people, I remember when I was growing up, there was this myth that was out there that especially guys would say is that I'll use it until I get married and then I won't need it. And what you find is that there's plenty of people that just falls apart. They continue to need it after marriage because they have created a sexuality that's on their own. I have second or third. It separates us from people, makes us consumers of people. We start, instead of seeing the humanness in the other, we start seeing objects in one another. One of the things that you hear all the time is that pornography is great because it's not hurting everyone. Everyone's consenting to create it. There's no STDs. There's no pregnancy. And so they make this magical picture. But the truth is there's a lot happening behind the scene. Have you taken pictures and you're like, oh, I need to crop that out? And then there's wires, so I need to get at a right angle to try to get, and then there's other people in the picture, so you try to, am I the only one that tries to take pictures that way? Is get the perfect image but hide the yuck. Anyone else do it that way? Yeah, that's pretty normal, right? When people create pornography, they're very careful to try to capture one thing and hide a bunch of other stuff. Some of the stuff that they're hiding is just this idea of frequent drug use to dull the physical and emotional pain. The level of drug use within the porn industry is staggering. There's videos that show deaths from either suicide or drug overdose. It'll be like 5 seconds per person, and these videos last 10, 12 minutes of the people that have lost their lives from drugs or suicide. Huge amounts of catastrophe from that. Quite a few of the kids we help at Project Patch are fairly sexually active, and a lot of the young girls that we work with attempt to learn about sexuality through porn, and they can't understand why it's so painful. And what we have to tell them is painful for the people creating it, they're just hiding it behind drugs. And we've got these poor little kids that think there's something wrong with them, when the reality is there's something wrong with what they're trying to copy. Hugely painful, emotionally, physically painful. High probability of having sexual abuse as children, and so the people that are in that industry, both creating it, high chance of sexual abuse. Abusive or distant father, the studies that have come out that really show the dad role in their life, either negligent, abusive, or just no father at all, is a common theme. This is probably the saddest one. It's called coercion. There'll be a girl that's hired, contracted to do a movie. She'll show up to do that movie, and there'll be 6 guys there. And at that moment, she didn't sign up for that. But she's not safe to do anything else. And so when you watch that movie, you wouldn't know that she's terrified and scared and not doing something she consented for. And so that coercion, when you start looking at, we're part of a network that trains kids on sex trafficking. And so when you look at Shared Hope International, which is located in Vancouver, of all places, really close to us, they have training on helping kids understand how are kids groomed into the sex industry. And what time and time again, coercion, threat, manipulation, all these things take place. And so for most people watching the content, they wouldn't see that because they hide all that other stuff. And then human sex trafficking, like I said, half prostitutes create pornography, so there's just this role of human sex trafficking that's very real. And so they hide all this stuff, and as you listen to it, how many of you just feel this grossness in your stomach? How many of you feel angry about this? Yeah. It's sickening, isn't it? And so this is, and I'm not a big fan of Jonah Mix, but I think he captures something here that's so good for me. He says, I'm not interested in a world where men really want to watch porn but resist because they've been shamed. I'm interested in a world where men are raised from birth with such unshakable understanding of women as living human beings that they're incapable of being aroused by their exploitation. That's a big line, isn't it? Yesterday when we were talking, we said that young kids are motivated by external things, right? Fear or reward. What is it that motivates teenagers and adults? Internal motivation, right? This is the right thing to do. When you read a thing like that and have the background, what I find is that teens are very good at wanting to do the right thing. They want to be authentic, they want to be protectors, they want to be defenders. And so the values that we work on is, instead of saying don't use porn, we say, what would you think about being the kind of person that the vulnerable are safe with? Instead of saying, don't look at pornography, we say, what would it be like if you're the defender of people with vulnerabilities? Instead of breaking innocence, what if you're the kind of person that helps heal relationships? Does that make sense? And so when you look at being the defender versus the user, that's what we're calling kids into. And instead of putting the shame of, hey, you looked at that, there's something wrong with you, we're saying, what would it be like if you are part of the solution? Part of that side. And to me, that calls up a different part of me. Does that make sense? It calls me up to do something, something really good rather than avoid something. So yeah, incapable of being aroused by their exploitation. To me, that's a really big point. Number 3, reduces ways for God to work in our lives. I'm really thirsty right now, so what should I do? Get a drink, right? Would my phone help me at this point? It wouldn't satisfy, right? What I find interesting is that for us, we're using phones, we're using all these other methods to bring us satisfaction. In the meantime, God's like, I got something for you. And we're like, no, I got it, I'm fine. I'm taken care of. So we're using people, objects, things to try to soothe ourselves, and the whole time God is like, I could help you with that. And we're like, nope, got it, I'm self-sufficient, right? And so we have these things in place that's blocking God to bring relief, to bring all sorts of good things. And so for me, that's part of it, is that God is wanting to help us. We talked a little bit about Psalm 103. He says that I will satisfy your desires with good things, What would that be like? It's natural for kids to have sexual desires, but what if even before marriage and a way of God satisfying the need for belonging, the need for appropriate touch, that's what God wants to do, is help our kids thrive, not get entrapped in some weird sexuality, especially non-covenant sexuality. So God is wanting to do good stuff. So that's the pornography section. Everyone let out a good sigh. You made it. Any questions before we move on to video games about pornography?
I just like to say one thing, Pastor. Before tech, before internet, and it's much younger than the numbers on here. We're talking real young, 6, 7, 8 homes that are broken, Adventist children that don't go to Adventist schools. They are being exposed, and I can speak from experience. All of this stuff is already known before teen years.
Yeah.
This is nothing. Video, what they're seeing on the internet, even in my age, and I'll be 56 in December, my school kids, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 13, 14, 15, they were already all having sex, all knew about it. Things that you would think you would only hear on the internet was already being said. They learned it at home from their parents, magazines. To me, it really needs to be talked about God.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we can expect. This is nothing, and this has been around since Sodom and Gomorrah.
Oh, for sure.
We really need to bring in the Lord and how much He loves us. If family can do that, we're not talking religion. We're talking about God and how much He loves us. And really, if we didn't have this stuff in our homes and had more of God in there, but remember, our children, a lot of us can't afford to go to the church schools, and our children are in school, and I had to take my daughter out of there, and she was exposed to porn at a very young age through grade school and a lot of other stuff. So it's there. It's
Yeah.
there way before teen years.
And I think as we look at, especially yesterday's model, is that you start young, age appropriately. Even for us, there's books like Good Pictures, Bad Pictures that really help for an age appropriately for really young kids to start even at an age that you don't use the word pornography, but you start discovering the idea that there's good stuff and there's bad stuff. There's people that are harmful. There's images that are harmful.
Pastor Nelson
Yeah.
has a video about porn, and there was like, I don't know,
Yeah,
very young.
yeah,
12, 13,
yeah,
14, 15, they all stood
yeah.
up.
And I think part of this discussion that we're having around pornography is that for a lot of kids, like I said earlier, they haven't talked about it. They haven't been given reasons not to use porn or to stop using porn. Both of those things.
We should talk
Yeah.
to them.
Oh, exactly. The conversations need to start early, and then part of it is we get so mad at them for seeing it, not realizing that it's coming at them, their choice or not.
I've been mad
Yeah.
at
And
they needs to be talked to.
yeah. And so the process of talking about it, finding hope, sharing tools, and we'll get into tools a little bit because there's some specific tools that are available now that never were available way back then. Hugely important. The challenge that we have is that Satan's done such a good job of creating an environment in which it seems like the most natural thing to do. For our kids and sexuality, the consequences are put off, and I'll talk about that a little bit on the recovery section even today. But for so many of our kids, they believe that they can just do this and it's not going to harm anyone, or they're so hopeless about the future that they don't care. What does it matter that I do because I'm just trying to keep my head above the water. The other thing from yesterday's discussion, and I apologize that we can't capture all of it in one sitting, is that when we look at even pornography, porn isn't their problem, porn is their solution. And so when they're feeling lonely, when they're feeling bored, when they're feeling depressed, they've got a tool that for a few minutes helps them feel better. And so part of what we're looking at is how do you get the underlying reasons helped so that they wouldn't need to use these, what we call maladaptive ways to meet their needs. What if they met those in really healthy ways? And so that's the ultimate, isn't it? That our kids' needs are met in healthy community and relationship. And that's what we're shooting for. But for kids that have struggled, it's really hard. What I'd like to do is just take 5 minutes, just because you've been sitting for a little while. I'm afraid to give you 5 minutes because we've just finished talking about something really hard. But just give 5 minutes, give a little stretch. I'm going to drink a little bit of water, and then I'll call you in and we'll talk video games, social media. Those are a lot easier. Still difficult, but we'll talk through those, and then we'll move into some recovery stuff. So 5 minutes starting now. So we'll start again at like 3:32. Check. Luther, can you turn this off for just a minute? I thought you guys were playing.
Okay,
Third time's a charm.
I think it's time for a new sound guy. So I heard that there's a search for one, but we'll keep looking. There's one thing that I forgot to say earlier when I introduced Chuck, and that is that we have a little basket back here by the sound booth, and it's for a love offering for Project Patch. And he informed me that even though his name is on there because I put it on there, the money will all go to Project Patch to help. They have many, many needs. I know that when Maranatha goes there, we do a lot of major construction all in 2 weeks, but they have small needs. They have various needs for their classrooms. They have various needs for their recreational department and a lot of things. If you go onto their website, projectpatch.org, you'll find a list of needs that they have, and you can contribute there directly to those needs if you wish. But anyway, today we do have the little basket for love offering.
Thank you. And I will say the majority of our funds we use, we have a sliding scale and we say yes to kids and families. And so that's our commitment to, if we can serve the child, we'll do everything possible to get them the care they need. And so that's the big push of, majority of our funds go to that, but we do like the fun stuff too. So video games, let's not freak out. Video games, games are games. Games can be good, like regular games, families playing games together are good. Video games, just because it's electronic doesn't mean it's evil. That being said, we're talking about what I say is the most engineered object to keep you playing that I think our world has ever known. If you think about a really good author, how does the author end a chapter? Usually it's like, and then the door started to open. I can't go to bed. I got to read the next chapter, right? It's the cliffhanger that keeps you going. Video games are the ultimate cliffhanger. They just are designed to keep you engaged. That's the nature of them. We're familiar with engineered spaces, aren't we? How many of you go to the grocery store? Is the grocery store laid out for your benefit? The most common things you need from the grocery store are what? Bread, bananas, milk, eggs. Yeah, eggs, milk, bananas, bread, I think, something like that. Are those conveniently put in the very front of the store for you? Would be nice, right? No, they put them all over and they keep moving them. And so it's engineered. They know where to put stuff, the shelf space, all that stuff is planned for the store's benefit so you can buy stuff. I'm one of those people that I walk into Fred Meyer thinking I'm just going to get one thing. Next thing you know, I'm walking out with all this other stuff. Why is that? Because they designed that to happen. That's the interaction that they designed. The other thing is that even for kids level, they design grocery stores for eyes that are down here as well as eyes that are up here, and the experience is dramatically different between those. So when your kids are begging for all this stuff, they make it that way. That's on purpose. One of the most engineered spaces other than that is casinos. And driving down from Portland, you pass some of the casinos. Why do casinos exist? To make money for the house, right? That's exactly why they exist. Some of the ways that casinos are engineered is interesting. That's not the greatest picture of it, but most casinos you can't walk straight through. When do machines in a casino make noise? When you win. If you don't win, what happens? Nothing. What do you not see in a casino? Windows? Clocks? Why do you not see windows or clocks? You want to lose track of time, right? That's what they want people to do, is lose track of time. The other interesting thing is, what do you rarely see in casinos nowadays? When you bet, what do you bet with? Chips or a card. You don't see money. Does that seem weird to you? Why do you not see money? Yeah, you don't want to spend money, right? But a chip doesn't feel the same. It's a chip, right? So people are throwing that down. I was talking in Australia with some people, and they had done this big building project, and it was for a casino, and they said that the casino people wanted the ability to change the oxygen level in the room. Why would they want to do that? People get drowsy. Isn't that interesting? Why did they not get to do it? A highly oxygenated room blows up. I don't know, it's got problems. It catches on fire faster. Can you imagine, Pastor, if you could do that in your church? Like, people are getting sleepy in the sermon, you just turn up the oxygen. Get that alertness and the amens going. But can you imagine that they thought of that? That they thought of that. And why did they think of that? For your benefit or for the house's benefit? For the house's benefit. And so it's an engineered environment for them to make money off you, okay? And the whole time they have you feeling like what? They're being generous to you, right? The mind swaps around. It's just so crazy to think about. And so when you look at video games are an engineered experience. They're engineered, especially the multiplayer online experiences. That's where it's connected to the internet, those sorts of things. They're getting all sorts of information back from the user. Why? So they can get your eye time and get your wallet. You know, both of those things are important. In the olden days, the high score was super important for video game use. I was in the Pac-Man era, and so you'd go to the place and put your quarter on the video game so you get to play next. Remember that? And if you got the high score, what could you do? Play longer or get your 3 initials at the very top of the leaderboard, right? So leaderboards played a huge part of video games. High score was a big deal. Majority of games nowadays, high score plays not much of a story. Okay, and so when you're talking to your kids about video games, they probably aren't like high score. If they have a high score like a game like Subway Surfer, there's scores that last for maybe 2 weeks or 1 week, typically about 1 week. So every week there's a leaderboard, and that leaderboard is something that you can see all the people you're passing as you get up on the leaderboard, but then that resets on the next week. Why do they do that? Because if the high score was so unattainable, you wouldn't even try. Does that make sense? And so every week you're trying. And what's interesting, some of these games that have a high score, you can see your high score passing other people. Do you think those are real people? I have no idea, right? But they know that as they see you passing other people, you're going to be like, yeah, I'm pretty good at this game. Right? And so they play that high score plays a role that way. But most of the high scores are going to be regional. They're going to be like North America. They're going to be short-term high score. Beating the game, that was kind of an idea of some of the games that, especially early games, I'm going to finish all the levels and I'm going to win. These are games that are more like a novel, more like a movie than like an arcade game. And so as you play through the game, that's how you play. And a lot of these games, once you beat the game, then you get after-game content. And so it's the way of revealing the storyline and experiencing a book more like, or a movie that you're a part of. Does that make sense? And so a lot of games are designed with that in mind. How many of you enjoy stopping a book in the middle or stopping a movie in the middle? Yeah, that's hard to do, right? And so these games are designed that way that you keep playing, saying, get off that game. Well, it's hard to stop. It's really, really hard to stop. The role-playing continues to take a bigger and bigger role in video games. Anyone remember the Wii, the first versions of the Wii, the Nintendo Wii? You got a little avatar, a little version of you that was kind of cute. So if you have glasses, it had glasses, spiky hair, whatever, you have the little version of you. This is a little different than that. Nowadays, there's people that have their computer character, their game character, and they try to become more like that themselves. So they're transforming themselves to look like the role. You look at role-playing as just continued to become just this bigger and bigger industry. Everything from Comic-Con to dressing up like video game characters or movie characters, that's super appealing. So a lot of teens are doing this role-type stuff. The value of some of the characters that are developed are really big. It's interesting, like Fortnite is a video game that you've maybe heard of, seen kids play. Fortnite, kids pay money to get what you call a skin. Okay, that's like a different outfit choice. Does that outfit choice improve your gaming? It doesn't change one thing. It doesn't give you any special skills, but you look what? Cool, right? And your role and your character have a ton of value. So role-playing is really a big part of the games. And so I'm playing as this person. And then you look at, especially some of the Asian countries, there's differences. They tend to be more gamer than the US. You start seeing some confusion about who am I, the value of characters, all sorts of really interesting identity type stuff that comes in with role-playing. Discovery, this is interesting. When I was growing up in the 70s, there was probably about a 10-mile radius that I could go from, with my house in the center, I could go a long ways from my house without my parents really caring. Did they care about me? Yes, but I could get on my BMX bike or my skateboard and we could go for miles. Nowadays, how far do you think that kids are allowed to go from their house? Yeah, not even a mile. It's like a quarter of a mile. That hemmed in. When you go to playgrounds, you often hear the word be careful, although I tried to use the go big with my kids. But you hear be careful, and parents are there at the playground with their kids. That didn't happen when I was growing up. Parents weren't around, not to say that was great for my upbringing. Like I said, I had some issues. But it is interesting that a lot of kids, there's a natural desire for kids to explore and to be inquisitive. The woods behind your house are always interesting, right? Being able to play. The other thing is that a lot of play now is very structured. I'll just say that. When I grew up playing baseball, it was me and my friends playing. We made up stuff. We just did stuff. Nowadays, most of the kids, when they're playing, they have a coach as well as an official. Okay? And so it's highly supervised, even like sports play. I was at the Oregon Conference has a Bible camp for the high schools, and it's at the Young Life Camp in the middle of nowhere. Anyone know that? Where is it? It's not Big Lake. It's not a big lake. It's at the Young Life Camp. So huge camp. You know where I'm talking about? Yeah, huge place, right? They have this wiffle ball court. Did you see that? It's like a baseball diamond, but it's for wiffle ball. And we were out there, and I was watching all the teens, and there's about 20 on the field, just a bunch of kids everywhere. And one of the boys had hit a home run, and a person came running in saying, "Let's make that a two-base." Does anyone know what a two-base is? No, it makes no sense, right? But that place is so middle of nowhere that you can't get phone access, and most of those kids hadn't played baseball on their own figuring it out. One of the kids held his phone up to the sky and said, "If the phone just worked, we could figure this out." And then this girl, like a boss, came in and said, "I've played a lot of Wii baseball. I know exactly what to do." And then they played this ridiculous form of baseball, and it was so much fun to watch. It was so much fun to watch. But here's the thing, is that was kind of their first time without being able to access rules on their phone or having adults tell them exactly how to play, where they had to discover it. And there is a love of discovery in kids' hearts. I'll just say that. And the internet's one of the few places, especially with a video game, I think some of the reason Minecraft is so popular is that there's no one saying be careful. They can fly and dig and jump and build, and no one is like telling them to watch out. Does that make sense? It's an expansive world of discovery rather than the small world that they live in. And so part of my goal is that, hey, discovery is not a bad thing. Don't send your kids out to a dangerous place, but realize that there's a need for discovery in their hearts. Relationships. I remember the first time a kid came to Patch that he was really sad. Most of the kids aren't really told that far in advance that they're coming to Project Patch. And so this boy had come to us and he said, "I didn't get to say goodbye to my friends." And so we're just chatting. I'm like, "What are your friends like?" And he was describing them in weird ways to me. Most kids describe their friends, and this seemed odd. And after a little while, I'm like, are your friends all online? And he goes, yeah, we video game together. So how have you ever met them in real life? Like, no, but we've spent hours together, and he wanted to talk about all his games. But these are people that he had lived lives with for hours a day. He knew what certain information about them, but he didn't know them that well. But here's the thing is, were they real relationships to him? To him, they were very real, right? To him, they were very real. To me, I'm like, there's better, right? But here's the thing is that they're on their devices, doing adventures together, conquering things, relying on each other, trusting each other, communicating to each other, many times inappropriately, but that's how they're doing it, and they're doing hours of that together. There's a bond there. And a lot of these games trust on that bond. There was a dad that had finished college, and all his college friends were like, we need to get together sometimes, and so they started playing World of Warcraft together. And that's a game that's a multiplayer game, and they're on their headsets, and they're playing. This guy loved the relationship with his friends, but he discovered that he was playing with them, he was playing with these other people, he was playing with all these different people, and really not doing any of his home responsibilities. Work was suffering, his kids were growing up, and the moment that he kind of came to clarity was that he had his young son, I think he was 12, 13 or whatever, like, Dad, can you teach me how to play World of Warcraft? And his dad's like, why? And his son said, because I want to hang out with you. Just that heartbreaking moment of like, but that relationships pull is there. So for a lot of our kids, even if they want to study and now their friends are saying, hey, we're doing this, we're playing right now, we need you, we're on this adventure, we're on this, we're going to go conquer this thing. Is that easy for a kid to say, no, I've got to do my homework, I've got to go to sleep? It's really awkward, right? It's unlikely that they're going to not play. And so the power of relationships, a lot of the games are highly relational. The other thing is a lot of these games have no end now. They just keep going and going and going. You're just in a perpetual world that's getting bigger and bigger. And for certain people, that's just really kind of fun. But it's really hard to turn off a no-end game, isn't it? Because it's constantly there. It's constantly growing. And then just the physiological, we mentioned a bunch of them yesterday, but dopamine's a good example of them. It's a predictive way of feeling better through some of these games. Getting an accomplishment, getting something done, getting through that rushed moment, all those things feel really physically good. And so that's that process. When you watch kids play like Fortnite and the world keeps getting smaller and smaller and they're trying to win, they're feeling a bunch of like alive feelings during that. If they do really well, they're feeling all sorts of pride. Those sorts of things come out. So all these things are tied into different video games. There's not like one game that has them all. And what you'll find is that most kids that I talk to are drawn to different types of games. Some kids just love a sports game. Other kids like the active shooter type stuff. Some kids really like the puzzle. Some kids like the building stuff. For me, I will say that I don't really enjoy having video game talks with like 12-year-olds, because especially 12-year-old boys can chatter forever about a video game. But part of it is I am curious. As I talk to kids about video games, what do you play? What do you like about that game? What are some of the levels that keep you thinking about it over and over? Here's the weird thing is that some of these are games they're playing, and some of the games they're watching other people play. So when you talk about a kid that's really into gaming, they're both gaming and a lot of times doing YouTube, TikTok, some of those kind of things. They're using some server types things to watch other people play. That's a big part of the culture. But why are you doing that? What are you attracted to? Because as I look through this list, let's say that it's a game that's heavy on role playing. What could that maybe tell you about how they feel about themselves? Yeah, it could reveal that maybe they're not feeling comfortable with who they are or appreciated or natural in their of who they are. And so a lot of times that gives us an open door, because a teen's not going to come to you and say, I'm uncomfortable with who I am. But if they're playing a game that involves pretending to be someone else for significant hours of a day, that's insight. Does that make sense? If you're looking at discovery, hey, why don't we try doing something outside? Why don't we go do a real adventure activity? Those are the kind of things that you do once you discover what they're doing. For kids that are looking at status, a lot of like the blitz of video games, like the fancy outfits or high score, that probably means that there's, some achievement needs that they have, those sorts of things. And so for me, this is the reason that you say turn off that stupid game. They can't. It's because it's engineered for them to keep playing. Okay? It's hard for them to turn it off. And so part of it is know why, and then part of it is it's a revelation of maybe what their real needs are as you look at that game. And I will say that the games get more and more complicated. Just the worlds that they're building, the way that they have kids connected are increasingly really good. So here's the thing is that if an author writes a book and people get to that chapter and put the book down and go to sleep, does the author know? No. But does a video game creator know if people give up at a certain section? What do? Tweak it, right? Tweak it with whose best interest? Theirs. And for a lot of kids, they're like, well, they're providing fun for me. Yeah, but a lot of times there's product endorsements, either hidden product endorsements or you're watching ads to keep playing. So those are things that you're selling your time to them to get that back. They're buying your time. And why are they buying it? Because it works, right? And for other kids, just the amount of money that they're spending, the outlay of financials just to keep up with the game are significant. Signs of addiction, this is kind of helpful. A lot of parents are like, my kid's addicted. They played for 8 hours. All Sunday they played that video game. Okay, when's the last time that you read a book into the night? That you were trying to go to bed, but you kept reading until 3 in the morning. Were you addicted? Maybe, or maybe you were just really enjoying a good book. It's be careful with that phrase, because number of hours is interesting, but it's not necessarily everything. What I'm more interested in is do they lie about how much or how long they play? What's their awareness level? So if you say, how long did you play? And they're like, oh, I played it probably about an hour, but you look, if they have a way of logging it, it's like 7 hours or even 3, that would be a disconnect. It is interesting is that video games tend to be this activity that is, I'm losing the not distracted, but where you're, I'm not going to get it right now, where your brain is less active in processing time. Does that make sense? You can forget about all sorts of problems. You can forget about all sorts of anxieties when you're playing because your brain is just kind of in this trance mode really easy. Does that make sense? And when you're in trance mode, especially lower brain, upper brain, lower brain doesn't know how to tell time. Okay? So that's why when you're really afraid in a car accident, how long does it seem to take? Really, really long. Does that make sense? Or there's times that you lose track of time, all those things. So the lower brain doesn't keep track. And so part of it is how much of their upper brain is engaged as they play video games. It kind of reveals that to me, is how long do you lie about how much you play? Do you try to stop and can't? Are there times that you need to study or you need to get to bed? What do you do then? For a lot of our kids, they try to turn it off and then they go back to it. It's kind of a boomerang. And so they try to stop and it comes back. Disrupted life pattern, these two, disrupted life pattern and feed into other behavioral issues, those kind of go together. So imagine a kid that's a super gamer. They play it into the night, morning comes, the alarm goes off, what do? Not wake up easily, right? So their very first interaction with their family that morning is a parent that's angry, getting them out of bed, and then they're usually have some homework that wasn't done, they're not feeling great, sleepy, they get to school, and during the school day, how are they feeling? If I don't have much sleep, I'm kind of grumpy, and so grumpy, irritable, tough time staying awake in class, not prepared for class. And so how's your day going throughout the school day? Pretty rough, right? Friendships, all those things are just a little harder when you lack sleep. So by the time they get home at the end of the day, what do they want to do? Feel better. Sleep is the right answer, but they just want to feel better. Forget their day. So what are they going to do? I'm going to play for 45 minutes before I have to do homework. And so they play for how long? 5 hours, 7 hours, whatever. What you know is before long, the sleep cycles get flipped around, school problems happen, family problems happen, and it just starts getting disrupted. All this stuff starts getting flipped around, so you're so tired you can't sleep. Some of those things happen, and so it's really Crazy how that life schedule starts happening and starts getting it in problems. Question, can they go up and do something else fun? They used to love snowboarding. Friends called them up, we're going up to Mount Ashland on Sunday. You want to come with us? And the kid says, no, I've got to do homework. And their friends go off to skiing all day, snowboarding, and when they get back and they go online, what did they discover? What did their friend do? Played video games all day, right? They didn't study all day. And here's the crazy thing is most of the stuff we're doing now is there's a public record of it even. And so they can tell that their friend used to love doing that, but now they'd rather sit at home and play. And so these sorts of things are what I'm super interested in is what's it doing to the life? How's it turning stuff around? You notice that I'm not even talking immoral video games. It just has a tendency to flop life around. For us, as we're raising real little kids, when they're really little, you have to train them to be able to turn it off themselves. How do you tell when that timer is going off? So early on, you have to set a timer, but past that, you try to get them so they can hear that timer. So can you play for 45 minutes? Well, show me. What I tell kids over and over too is that I think parents would like you to play more video games if it didn't end in a fight every time it had to stop. So for me, part of our kids as we were raising them with even playing an occasional video game is you can play this, but if it ends in a fight, then we're going to have the day off. You're going to not be able to play tomorrow. If I have to remind you to turn it off, then it's going to be more time until you can play again. So it's just small little consequences that you're just trying to teach them that, hey, if you fight with your sibling as you play this, that's something that I don't want, so we're going to stay away from that game for a day. And so if they're getting along, if they're stopping when they need to stop, if they're taking care of responsibilities, we tell kids that if you're playing a video game and your dad or mom say, hey, I need someone to set the table, and you set the controller down and go set the table, that'll be good. That'll be like a really, really good thing that you can do. Why? Because you're not letting the game take over for real life. Does that make sense? You're demonstrating that you can put better priorities in front of that priority. Those are the kind of things that we're watching for kids to learn and encouraging them. So social media, and then we're going to get into some recovery stuff. Social media is not all horrible. Like I said, for most kids, about an hour, 45 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, 30 minutes a day of being able to know what's going on kind of puts them at ease. That's not that long for kids, but for us, that seems like a long time. But for a short bits of time, this is helpful for kids to know what their friends are doing. You did it with phones when you were their age. You called all your friends and were on the phone for hours. Now they can do it with their electronic methods, and kids want to know what everyone's doing. That being said, it can turn dark pretty quick. Remember that little dip? What happens when you pass that frame? It can really get challenging after that. And for a kid that's already feeling bad, the more they use, the harder it gets. About 72% of teens feel like they're being manipulated while they're online, which just amazes me. How many teens feel good being manipulated? I mean, that's a gross feeling to be manipulated, right? But teens know it, but they kind of put up with it. This is taken from Sam Lemon, The Guardian. There was an internal document from Facebook, so it's Meta now, that was they were trying to sell their marketing to a company. And so what it says is the company Facebook can monitor posts and photos in real time to determine when young people feel stressed, defeated, overwhelmed, anxious, nervous, stupid, silly, useless, and a failure. In real time. Can we do that in real time in this room? We really can't, right? So they can check with the algorithm how you're clicking on stuff, what you're watching, when you're watching. They can kind of do a bunch of stuff. Why did they do all this work? Okay, so here's a question. I'll just be my embarrassing reveal. You know how Facebook gives ads? I've been getting all these t-shirt ads for dad bods. For dads that want to hide their gut and make their shoulders seem stronger. That is a very specific email, isn't it? How does Facebook know that I need that? Maybe they can look at my pictures, I don't know. Or maybe they just start doing that to guys in their 50s. But that's a very specific ad that's coming to me. what mood would I likely buy that in? If I'm feeling great about myself, will I buy that shirt? But if I'm feeling kind of down, depressed, that's probably that time that I'm going to click, right? That I'm going to choose to buy that thing. So whether it's fitness products, skin products, whatever, imagine our kids that are feeling defeated, overwhelmed, anxious, all these kind of things, that when they're down, when they're feeling depressed, they're more likely to be vulnerable to advertising. Or when they're really feeling excited, maybe that's when they buy this other type of stuff, right? If the company knows what mood they're most likely to buy at, where do they try to put you? Let's just say that. What are they happiest when you are down, right? When you're needy, when you're feeling insecure. That's when you're most likely for a sale. So when you're looking at this sort of anything from Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, those are what you call a curated timeline, okay? Curated means that whatever is given to you by an algorithm that chooses to give it to you for a specific purpose, okay? You're not seeing first in, first out. So you're not seeing a string of what all your friends are doing. You're seeing stuff presented to you with advertisements as well as random stuff. All that's given to you in a curated way because they want to do what? Affect your mood. Affect your mood. It exists so you do purchases. And so when you look at how they curate it, it's not so you feel better, it's so they can sell stuff. And the reason I tell this to teens, the way I want teens to experience it, is because when teens hear this, they feel a little gross about it. They feel angry about it. They don't like being manipulated. They don't like the fact that certain things that they share that might be really positive are hidden. Well, something that seems really negative gets a lot of press. They don't like that stuff. And they don't like the fact that there's someone out there that's designing products to use them, not help them. This guy's named BJ Fogg, Stanford University, really interesting. He's done some really good work around tech and habits, and so I'm not trying to make him out to be some horrible person, okay? But I will say that a lot of his teaching has been used in horrible ways. He's a psychologist, okay? So he's supposed to be helping people with behavior, with relationships. He says, I train innovators to use my work so they can create solutions that influence behavior. The focus areas include health, financial well-being, learning, productivity, and more. That and more is what scares me. Because all those other things like health, increase people's health, behavior change, that all sounds really positive. But the reality is a lot of people use his work, and I think in ways with him encouraging to create a lot of problems. And I'll say that I had permission to use his chart that you'll see next in a video, and then they took it away from me once they watched the video. But we're in a teaching environment, so we can do that since this is live. We have some prerogative. But Dr. Fogg's team, he was really polite to me, but his team was pretty horrible to me when I presented some of this stuff, and they had access to it. What he teaches is this BMAT model. This is taken directly from his website. B equals MAT, so behavior equals motivation, ability, and trigger. And so really easy to understand. On the very bottom, you've got from hard to do to easy to do. And so let's say you're sitting on the sofa and there's a bag of chips next to you and you're watching TV. How easy is it to eat that whole bag of chips? Pretty easy. If that chips were in the cupboard, a little harder, right? And so if you started to feel, like a craving, you're more likely to eat it when it's easy. Does that make sense? And so for a lot of stuff they do is how can I make it easy to do is what tech looks like. How can I make it as easy as possible? Amazon shopping, how hard is it? Easy, right? That's their theme, is how can we make it as easy as possible so you have the impulse, I need that, you click on it, and the next day it's there. Super duper easy to do. YouTube videos, how easy is it to pick your next video? It's probably already playing, right? It just is easy. It just happens. When you look at like Netflix and all these things, to binge a whole series, how hard is that? Easy as can be. They make it easy. That's their technique, is technology takes something that's really hard to do, and the push of it is to make it as easy as possible. The other thing is motivation. From low motivation, if you're low motivated and it's hard to do, even if you have a trigger, you're unlikely to do it. I laugh about this. Learning another language, easy to do, hard to do. Hard to do, right? So your motivation most likely is pretty low. So imagine you're an 8th grader, 9th grader boy in high school, and your teacher's saying, I need you to learn a new language. That's a pretty big ask, right? But what if the foreign exchange student comes and she's absolutely stunning? And now you have the privilege of learning her language. What just changed? Did it become easier? No, but the motivation changed, right? So when motivation changes, you end up doing some pretty difficult things because the motivation is there. And so as you look at certain things, like exercise trackers are a good example. I have a watch on right now that tells me all sorts of things. I can tell you how many steps I've taken today. Is that easy to do or hard to do? It's easy to do with my watch, but if I was to ask you to do it without a watch, how would you do it? Click, click, click. Remember, or the pedometer, even that was like one thing. But it takes something that's hard to do and makes it really, really easy. And what we find is that people's behavior changes based on that, right? Because we're competitive, all sorts of stuff happens. But that's an example of maybe even a good thing. What I find interesting is Snapchat has these things called streaks. Anyone familiar with that? The streak is that let's just say that we're Snapchat buddies. We have a streak going where every day I do an image and we exchange. Does that make sense? Kind of. That's in its easiest form, I'd say that. So if I don't send you something, what happens to your streak? It goes away, right? We break that streak if we're not doing that. We have kids at Project Patch that are going to be with us 6 to 14 months, and we've had them with their friends keeping streaks going at home with someone else having access to their account. Or they're sending pictures of the black, the pillow or the ceiling because they have that streak is so important. What powers or financial benefit do you get from keeping the streak alive? It's worth nothing. Right? But you get badges, you get all this other stuff, and you get like, wow, we've got a super long streak. Is that hard to do? That's super hard to do, but what do they do with motivation? I'm motivated because I don't want you mad at me. Does that make sense? Or I'm motivated because this little prize means something to me. Binge watching, easy to do and high motivation, all those kind of things start working in. What I present to this for teens is that once you start learning how they use combinations of ability and motivation, and then what triggers do they use to make you step across the line and act, the more you learn about this, you start seeing it in applications all over the place. You start seeing, how do they design this game that I really like? How do they design this social media thing that I really like? And you start seeing it for what it is. You see the manipulative pieces that they have at work. And part of that is I want teens to know, because it feels gross to be manipulated, and some of it is if you know how you're being manipulated, it's easier to shut it down. How many of you have ever overeaten at a buffet? Okay? They say that the easiest way to not overeat at a buffet is to use the salad plate, the smaller plate, and to sit at the farthest away from the buffet and put your back to the tables. Okay? It doesn't take any more self-discipline. It's just a way that you eat less at a buffet. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? It's gaming your brain. One of the easiest ways to cut down your YouTube time is to go into YouTube and turn off the autoplay. One simple little step that makes it so you're less likely to just get on the thing. Same thing with all your watching things on TV, so that you're not automatically watching the next episode. All these little things are things that once you understand how they're using motivation and triggers, you just start changing. I will say that for me, I have my stand record on my watch. I have an Apple Watch, and it tells me to stand every hour. Is that good? Most of the time. Is it good for me to be sitting on an airplane waving my arms around desperately trying to keep my stand record going? No, that's the dumbest thing possible. And so there's something good about failing some of this stuff, realizing that you can make better decisions than these other things. Some of the things that concern me about tech use is, one is identity formation. What we're seeing is a lot of kids are crowdsourcing their identity formation. That means they're letting people vote on what they want to wear, what they're like as a human being. And so you're getting approval from the whole room. When I was a kid and I chose an outfit to wear to school, no one said much. I mean, I'm grown up in the Midwest. Nowadays, you post a picture and people are liking it or not liking it. And if they don't like it, what do? Try to guess about why they didn't like it and change. And so we have a lot of kids using the crowd to choose how they act, who they are. And to me, that's one of the scariest things, is God created them unique and fantastic. And a lot of times when you're a teen, the world will not recognize you for your value until maybe you're even older. There's just a craziness that happens with teens and valuing that we try to stay away from. And so identity formation is a big one. What we find is huge amounts of dissatisfaction, comparing their lives to other people, seeing themselves as distorted. And so other people seem to be happier, healthier, all those kind of things. And me, I'm not. And so part of the discussion when we have with teens is, let's track how you feel about your life, your satisfaction level as you start using this stuff. Just be aware of it. Cyberbullying, this is one that is really interesting. It could be a whole session. What we find is that there's a lot of stuff that happens cyberbullying. Most of the time, you as a parent or a mentor will not see it for what it is. You'll look at it and like, that's not whatever. Be aware that you don't have to agree that it's cyberbullying. If they're being affected, if they're being intimidated, if they're starting to squeeze in their life and feel fear around stuff, take it seriously. Take it very seriously. So many of the parents that I've talked to regret those moments that they tried to analyze it before responding to it. And what we say is respond to your kids. Keep your kids safe. Report stuff to the school. Let people deal with cyberbullying instead of just like turn it off and go to bed. They can't do that. They simply can't. And so take it seriously, even though you might not totally understand it. A lot of social media, people talk about the risks to girls. This is a boy named Carter Christensen. He had come from Minnesota to climb the Flatirons in Colorado, which is this free climbing area. This is a picture he had taken right before he fell to his death. And this incredible push that's happening, especially around action sports, adventure sports, in which people keep pressing boundaries to do bigger, faster, farther. So let's say that I jumped over this thing right here and you guys are like, whoa. If I did it again, what kind of response would I get? But so for me to do it again, I'd have to do it with a twist, or I'd have to jump further. I keep having to do something bigger, faster, further. Does that make sense? And what we're finding is that the level of brain trauma, and I love skateboarding, I've talked about that, but some of the kids are doing life-altering, horrible things, mostly because the push to keep, especially get a bunch of boys with a little bit of marijuana and a lot of GoPro cameras, and it's a recipe for really bad things happening. And so part of the culture that we have is that we kind of have gladiators online, watching people put themselves at huge amounts of risk for entertainment. And there's kind of a reckoning that needs to come. But just recognizing for raising boys, especially, and some of the girls are suspect to this, is just that push to gain fame. There's huge amounts of money in stake for some of these things around motocross, around action sports, and we just need to be aware that that has a pull on them. It has a huge pull on them. So put away the GoPro camera when you go on adventures. Just enjoy the fun, all those sorts of things. So what do we do? I appreciate your patience this afternoon, and I hope, even as we've discussed, that there's been little things that you've been prompted with to think about. One of the things is really the power of relationship and conversation. There's nothing that substitutes time in together dialoguing. I mean, there's just no substitute for that, and it'll be uncomfortable for you and for them. Just trust me on that, but it's important to do. Some of the things that we really try to communicate is that I'm on your side. As we talk about this stuff, I'm not against you. I'm on your side. I'm trying to help you with this stuff. One of the conversations that we do, this is kind of an interesting one around sexuality. There's a couple other ones that we do. So this is a little boy that says, someday I want to be a football star. And so he's imagining himself as the college or pro football player, right? What skills do you have to be a good football player? Throw the ball, catch the ball, what else? Be big. Look like me, right? So what else do you have to do to be a football star? Run, work out, muscular, tackle, know how to play the game, physicality. What sort of bursts of energy are you looking to be really good at? fairly quick plays, right? On the line, burst of power, and then recover, and then the next time. So look at all these things. So what are you going to do? You're going to work out. You're going to get bulk. You're going to learn how to hit hard. You're going to learn how to use your hands really well to catch or to throw. All these are really important football skills. So imagine you've learned all these football skills. You've trained from being a little boy, and then it's your day to step onto the field, and you discover that this is what football really is soccer. What skills from football that you've learned are going to help you in soccer? When the ball comes to you, what are you going to try to do with it? Catch it. That's not good, right? When there's an opponent next to you, you're going to what? Hit him hard, and then they're going to roll around to the ground and pretend to hurt. It's a different game. How long's the game? 90 minutes. Do they let you rest? At the very center, right? Yeah, every 45 minutes, but that's not much. The play keeps going, right? And so here's the thing that we teach this kind of example for kids is for sexuality, the world as it teaches sexuality is preparing you for a type of game that when you enter into marriage and into covenant, those things aren't going to work. It's a whole different game. The world teaches sexuality as in how much pleasure can I get? How do I feel great? It talks about just you being kind of a conqueror in sexuality, that I'm trying to get as many people, I'm trying to collect it as a trophy. It involves my pleasure, and I'm going to focus on me being as pleased as possible. That's the world's sexuality. When you get into covenant and marriage, and in that relationship that God has so much good about, what skills are necessary? Trust, communication, caring, patience, really the fruits of the Spirit in so many ways. It requires a whole nother level of relationship skill. Let's just say that. It's a beautiful thing that God created, but can you see, if you prepare for a sexuality that's self-serving and you get into marriage, what are you going to discover? You can't. Those skills, in fact, are hurting your sexuality. Here's the problem, though, for let's say that a guy's been into pornography and that kind of sexuality, they get into marriage and it's not going as well. Who's he going to blame? He's going to blame the partner, right? If she was just more, but the reality is that his brain's gotten used to a sexuality that is not normal and not what God had intended. Relationship, and here's the thing is that God's model is so good. It's so good, but it's difficult. The other thing that I will say for especially for youth pastors that are raising up kids, we have these crazy notions of sexuality that we set up, is that your wedding night, your first wedding night is going to be beautiful, it's going to be amazing, and we show up all these things, and young married couples get married and they discover on their wedding night that what? It's hard. Communication and trust and all these things are awkward. Sexuality is not just this natural boom, hallelujah. It takes time and practice. It takes a relationship. And that's something that's okay. That's something that's okay. God designed people to grow together over time. And so I think so many couples feel really bad about themselves. It's like, did I do something wrong? No, God likes things to grow. God likes things to blossom, and that's including your sexuality as a married couple. We have to be really careful how we raise stuff because there's so much misunderstanding, and Satan finds ways to wedge and to create blame. What we say is pursue the authentic. Whenever you can find an authentic way of experiencing some of the stuff around video games, some of the needs for kids around relationship and belonging, authentic, helpful, appropriate touch, those kind of things, we try to pursue those. This is out of a book about Tech-Wise Family, which is a really, really good book. It's not a Seventh-day Adventist book, but he has this concept of a Sabbath. And so for technology, during the prime hours of the day, 1 hour a day that you just set the phone down, put it away. 1 day a week, what does that sound like? Yeah, take a Sabbath from your devices. Put it away for a whole day. And then 1 week a year. And so here's what's interesting is if I'm sitting with my phone sitting right next to me, how hard is it going to be to spend that hour? Really hard, right? But if I go for a walk with a friend for an hour, that I don't even miss the phone. Does that make sense? And so for our family, if we spend a day a week, so if we have a Sabbath in which we're worshiping and going on a hike together, doing something in the water, how much is the phone going to come up? My daughters just did a week on the Salmon River with a youth ministry, going down the Salmon River, camping on the beach every night. How much did they miss their phones every night? The whole trip, no phones? They said it was a highlight not having phones for a week. That they didn't miss them because they were doing what? Relationships and playing on the river, having an adventure. And so when you look at this, design an hour a day in which you're not with your phone, a day a week in which you structure it to make it easier to not be on your phone, and then find a way to just disconnect. For some of you, that might be too much. Delete an app for an hour a day. Take off Instagram for an hour. Take off Instagram for a day. Take off Instagram for a week. Those sorts of things might be the way to create that awareness. Is this okay? For kids in video games, curiosity. Before they play, have a little piece of paper. How long am I going to play? Simple question. So they write down, I'm going to play for 45 minutes, I'm going to play for an hour, whatever you've agreed upon. And then they answer a question, how do I hope to feel when I'm done? I hope to feel relaxed, I hope to feel whatever. They put down a feeling that they hope to feel when they're done. And then when they're done, how long did you actually play? And how do you actually feel? They write down those things. And then really the question is, would something else have worked better? So if you're hoping to feel relaxed and after an hour you feel wound up, let's find some other way to spend your next 45 minutes next time. Does that seem like it makes sense? And honestly, for us adults with our entertainment, we should do that with our entertainment too. I'm going to watch this TV for this long. How do I hope to feel when I'm done? Did it work? And if it's not working, let's find something to do with our time that actually does help us. That brings life, brings vibrancy, helps with our relationships. Focus on the positive. It's so easy to become negative and shaming. What do I want you more of? What do you want more in your life? I want to be this kind of person. I want to be the defender. I want to be someone that people can feel secure around. I want to have more fun in my life. I want to have more belonging. I'm tired of living secrets. I really want to live whole and not in fear. Those are the positives that we're moving toward. Focus on recovery over abstinence. Abstinence is all about not doing something. So imagine that if I have this moment where I have clarity, I want to stop moving toward this, and then I just stop there, how hard is it going to be for me to resist? Pretty hard. Recovery is actually repentance. You turn around and you start taking steps toward where you want to go. And you notice that now I'm steps away from that old behavior. I've taken recovery steps. And recovery steps are really interesting. Recovery is stuff that you do to move toward health. It's the positive steps. So I'm going to be in relationship with people. I'm going to be attending group. I'm going to be reading books that are helpful. I'm going to have a mentor. I'm going to have accountability. Those are the steps that you take toward recovery. There's a huge plan that we teach at Patch. It's actually from a friend of mine named Matt Dobschutz. It's a weekly or a monthly plan in which you have, why am I doing this? What steps I'm taking? What risks do I have? It's really laid out. There's a link that I can share with you. This next book is his book. It's really fantastic. It's called The Porn Free. It's pretty much for any habit, but it's specifically around porn. But it's that idea of what steps do you take? And he spends a book kind of walking someone through to how to develop a plan, how to do the nuts and bolts of it. It's really positive. It's not necessarily written, he is a Christian, but it's written for a wide audience of people. But it's really that how do you recover? And a lot of people know they need to, but they don't know what that means. And so he really kind of gives the guidance for that. And then the final thing, anyone here mountain bike or ski? If you're going down the hill and you see a tree and you stare at the tree, what are you likely to do? You go there, right? And so part of it is that you have to learn how to turn your head and look for the path that you want to turn. Philippians 4:8, one of my favorite verses in the Bible. Summing it up, friends, I'd say that you do best by filling your minds and meditating on things true, noble, reputable, authentic, compelling, gracious, the best, not the worst, the beautiful, not the ugly, things to praise, not things to curse. Did you catch that? But that you'd be best by filling your minds and meditating or thinking about what things, did you catch that? Things that are noble, true, beautiful, all these kind of things. Here's the problem is that most of us have made this into like a beautiful poem rather than actually listen to what it tells us to do. It tells us, first of all, that we do what? Fill our minds. And so that's a really helpful step, right? Is actually expose your mind to really positive things. What things are you pursuing? Every day are you looking to try to get some of these things into your mind? And then secondly is how do you think about things? We actually have these cards that I've developed, and it's hard to see here, but across the blue is each one of these words. And then in the section below it, I've got my definition of that. So when I think about something that's beautiful, this is how I define beautiful. Next to that is movies, books, TV. And a lot of people are like, that doesn't sound too Christian. Have you ever noticed that you can remember something from a movie when you can't remember scripture? And we can club ourselves about that or just realize that there's times that we need something really easy to remember. And so there might be a scene from a movie or a book or a character from a book that really reminds you quickly about this virtue that you're thinking about. And so it's a book. Examples that I've had. So maybe it's sometimes that someone defended you or someone did something really kind to you. You're going to write that down in that section. Nature and activities. And so it could be like for me, purity. When I think about purity, I think about snowboarding with untracked snow. And I can go wherever I want on the mountain, and I can imagine a whole run. And after I've done that, you know that my mind is more at ease? Did I follow Scripture? I thought about something that is pure, okay? And what did it do to me? It helped me not obsess about really horrible things. As a Christian, I have another section that talks about biblical examples, characters in the Bible, stories from the Bible, those sorts of things. So when I put this together is when my mind is at ease. I can take a word and I write it down, I fill it out, and I have a little card. I've actually put it on my phone at times, but I have these accessible, so if I'm at home or traveling, I have access to it. So have you had those moments that you feel really attacked in the brain? Memories of things you've seen or done, mistakes that you've made, worries that you have, and you just can't stop thinking about it? At that moment, you pull out this stack of cards, you find one of these words that really compels you, you look at it, and then you think about things that are noble. And what happens as you think about things that are noble? God does a work. God calms your mind in a way that brings perspective, gets you integrated again in ways that makes you make better decisions. A lot of times gets you away from that line of making something really stupid happen. And to me, it brings a relief that is only from God. And so why do I do this? Because God told me to. Filling your minds and meditating on things that are. And so what I just want to encourage you is that this work, you can't do it in the moment that easy. You kind of have to prepare for it. Prepare for it by thinking about things throughout the day and then keeping a list so when your brain is under its worst attacks, you have something that you can look at. And so I encourage you guys for family worships, Philippians 4:8, just grab it and start looking down through the different words. You might not have all of them, but pick a word that really matters, start flushing out what it means, and then have that available because our brains will be under attack. And here's the thing is that it's that freedom. You know, when Satan gets us trapped, what is God wanting for us? Freedom, life abundant, relationships abundant, purpose abundant. That's what God wants for us. And I think that if we can, as a church, as a family, as people that are mentoring kids, if we can focus on these things, it happens. It happens. God is faithful in it. I know we've gone long, so I'm just going to close with prayer. And then if people have questions, I'm more than available to answer stuff, and we'll be on our way. Once again, projectpatch.org, we're a resource for you. We have blogs, podcasts, videos. There's a whole series that, because it's Sabbath, we aren't selling. But if you'd like a series, it's 12 episodes, 30 minutes a piece. It's a gift that I'll give to you. That just see me at the table back there. It's a video series. It's on thumb drive. I'm filmed in Australia, so you can get all this content plus hours more. 6 hours of teaching about this topic, and it's a gift that I'd love to share with you guys. I do need, if you're going to take it, I need your email and your contact so I can send you the study guide that goes with it, because you'll have to print that out yourself. But if that's something you'd be interested, I'll be out there at the table, and I'd love to send you home with a copy of it and it'd be a blessing for you. And it's something that feel free to share with other people. It's really given in a way that can really be community friendly, those sorts of things. So we'd love to get that in your hands. But let me pray for you, and we'll be on our way. Father, it's easy to be overwhelmed by the weight of this world, by the challenges, but we know that you're faithful, that you walk with us, that you go before us, that you make things clear for us on what we have to do. Father, just guide conversations with kids, with friends, that as we ponder these things, that we won't be left scared, but we have the ability to move forward in relationship, in your power and your strength. Father, help Scripture to come alive to us in ways that we find hope and healing and skills to deal with challenges. Father, just pray for kids. I know that there's kids that are really stuck right now, whether they're in our care, in our community, or whatever it may be. But Father, just give us wisdom on how to help, the right word to say in the right way to bring hope and healing. And Father, just pray for you to be glorified in your name. Amen.